There, if I put glasses on, with the
That's
glasses
better. That
better.
helps.
Yeah, it's better.
Okay, for the time being, gang, I'm not seeing any public. I will watch and try and be the gatekeeper. Jane and I just had a quick chat. I did say I had changed our agenda to reflect a 90-minute profile. If we don't use it, that's fine. You guys can all go away. But since that was promised to the public, I can stick around and cover that 5:20 time slot for them. Does everyone have, okay, quick roll call. We are all here. Jane Fuller, myself, Kevin Ranker, and Sharon Abreu. That's wonderful. Kevin, do you have to leave early?
Yeah, most likely.
Okay. Unknown so far?
Well, no, I've told my wife and daughter, Elsa's she has her first orthodontist appointment tomorrow. She's freaked out. And so she's asked for me to make my special sliders tonight.
Oh.
And all the fixings that go with it. And that will take more time than I have if I'm here that extra half hour. So
Gotcha. And you still haven't gone to the market, I'm sure, so.
What is it about men who plan to cook stuff and they don't even go to the market to get it, right?
I'm trying to admit it, at least.
So,
Okay.
Well, they think it's just there in the fridge. They don't know how it got there.
no, in all seriousness, I went to the market 2 days ago.
Good for you.
Oh, good.
No further questions, Your Honor. I think we'll leave that alone. Okay, has anyone not seen the agenda I sent this morning or the notes/minutes that came from Sharon through Jane last Wednesday?
I have reviewed both. I would move, if you're ready, Mr. Chair, that we
Please.
adopt the minute.
Okay, do I have a second?
Seconded.
Okay, any discussion on minutes or notes from last week? Okay, all in favor of passing as written with an aye?
Aye.
Hi.
Okay, so the ayes have it unanimously. The bullet numbers for the agenda are a little longer than they've been historically. I left the Wednesday sort of group CRC feeling a couple of things. One, pride for Jane and her presentation and the uptake of that and the appreciation she got from other members for everything from content to format. So kudos there. I also felt fairly behind. Like this committee's work is, I'm appreciating that there's a lot to it, but that some of the other committees had seemingly made more traction. With everyone's blessing, I kind of like to have some more challenging conversation today about maybe what it is that we focus on moving forward. That's to include the items that are in the spreadsheet, so the kind of our layout of topics, and then to really establish our guest list, and then to kind of pick what our next direction is, and have a game plan, even almost have the agenda built for next week. So with that, the first item I have here is to prioritize the revised issues on the spreadsheet. Kevin, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Didn't you also feel great sympathy for me? I felt beat up at that meeting.
Did you?
Yeah, I wanted to go cry. I didn't like any of you.
Were there outbursts that were personal in nature? I don't recall much of that.
I don't know.
Sharon,
I needed a therapist after that meeting. I want to here. I want a Kyle so I can just be like, dude, take over tonight. I'm out of here. So
Sharon,
sorry,
what was your
sorry to
impression?
disrupt your agenda.
Yeah, I'm just curious Sharon's impression of the meeting last week.
I blocked it out.
Yeah, why? What do you?
No, I mean, I think, it was inevitable that we were going to have some conflicts.
Mm.
And I wish we had more time and trust to work through them, I guess.
Mm. Mm.
I made the comment, I think it was, I did some work with Liz and Bill yesterday on definition of nature, which, let me tell you, was not the best 4 hours in terms of like trying to trying to settle. And we did good work, but very challenging. And the comment was made there that I would almost, I don't know how to do it mechanically, but I would almost propose that any future CRC appointment be 2 years. And there would be a year of scoping and a year of action, or a year of creation. And, you know, I don't know if you'd get as many people to apply or to step forward with that kind of, but, you know, it's not that this group can't do it, and it isn't, and this is not a jab at Kevin at all. It's not that giving short deadlines doesn't help create, you know, more solid action in some ways, but, you know, there are things that we'll leave behind. Maybe that's gotta be true each time, but there's also, you know, I think there are other people to hear from in the process. And, you know, for the sake of time, we've all gone down these various, these focal holes. And then when you come up for daylight and you try it on to the rest of the group and you get some rebuttal or you get some pushback, I think that's normal, natural, and healthy. But it's also sort of like, whoa, wait a second, you're not hearing what we said. And, you know, a lot of times it's not to say that all of Wednesday was like that, but I felt like a bunch of it was just people they weren't along for our ride. They weren't there to hear testimony. And I feel like that with some of the other groups. I want to be able to speak to some of those topics, but I appreciate that I don't have the whole story. So, Kevin.
If you don't mind just speaking about this this subject for a moment, kind of off agenda, but I'm actually very concerned because originally when we talked about the subcommittees, it was the subcommittees were going to go work on things. They would check back throughout their process and allow input from members who weren't on the committees. And then they would go back again. And then when they came back, they would have recommendations, and those would be discussed by the full commission. What I heard on Wednesday, which most frustrated me, was several members raised the point that basically the takeaway was, how dare you question this whatever subject? The committee's already decided it. Don't care, in my opinion. Like, maybe don't care is too strong, but my thought is the subcommittees are going through doing work, and we're reporting back, I hope at least a couple times before we come back with final recommendations. But even when we have made a decision, it still needs to be approved by the full commission, and that is not a rubber stamp.
Exactly.
And I will tell you that I just found out last week, and I was really taken back, frankly, that the Elections and Appointed Committee has decided not to do anything with any elected officials. None. They're all staying the same. And they did it in a flippant, sorry, I watched the video though, and it was David Dillendorf threw out a motion. I move we keep them all the same. And they were in the middle of a discussion, and somebody said second, and they all said like, okay, fine, forget it. Yeah, go ahead. I have a serious number of questions that I need to raise, and I'm going to raise those when the committee reports. And
so I'm not gonna challenge that. We need to talk about that, and this group needs that formative time. I would say one thing. I don't think stuff needs unanimity to move forward.
Not at all.
And I think that needs saying, and I think some of what you just said needs probably consistent repetition. And I don't want to take a lot of time I want to acknowledge that a lot of people are feeling that way. And I want to make sure that our work reflects that check back in process, and not getting so far ahead of ourselves that we've got all the right answers. So that's a good takeaway. I don't feel like that now. Do any of you feel like we're too far out with this group?
No, although we haven't, I would agree with the other positive compliments of Jane's presentation. So thank you, Jane, for doing that. I would also say, however, that we haven't come back with the detail that I think will raise eyebrows. When it does, we should expect that. What we said is we're looking at an oversight committee. We didn't go into detail of, and yes, that will have oversight over the prosecuting attorney. And we're going to hear from Randy, I guarantee it. And we're going to hear from other people as well. And I'm not saying in opposition, but there's going to be a lot of questions, from members of the commission of what does that mean? And so I think it was good that we did what we did, so people got a heads up. And now next time we're going to come back, in a week or two and say, here's more detail.
Mhm, mhm.
And
Yeah.
Sharon?
Something,
I want to, Sharon had her hand up. Did you get?
yeah, go ahead, Sharon. Sorry.
Just, it's a particular skill set, which I think actually you guys are quite good at, and I should be better at than I am considering my training. But to really strike a balance between just laying things out there and making statements that are true statements, or that we feel strongly are true statements, and also just somehow honoring that not everybody is going to be on board with all the same things. And I sense some real fear within two or three people on the commission. And I know what it's like to be in the minority. I've been so many situations where I feel like I'm in the minority, and I know how frustrating that is. And if you're really scared about something, how can we help people to feel like they've really been heard, and can we do anything to set their minds at ease if something's going in a direction that they don't like?
Yeah, question. I have a question, Sharon, for you on that. I mean,
Yeah, please.
sorry, Mr. Chair. if
Yeah,
you
go,
don't-
please, go ahead.
Just what you mean by fear, Sharon. Part of what I'm struggling with, I've shared this with both Kevin and Kyle, is because I haven't lived here full time for 20 some odd years, I'm less familiar with the culture of this place. Okay. And so I find it quite revealing when I get questions from some of the commissioners, like I did last Wednesday, asking about what we mean by certain things that to me are things you think most people might know about. Okay. Or, it takes me back, frankly, to having conversations of gender equality in African villages. Okay. And, so what I'm realizing is that's going to be important really important for our group is to be quite clear about what we're talking about, to realize in communicating it that we're in effect, raising awareness of some peoples, and to present it in a manner that doesn't feel overwhelming, that doesn't feel like you're tossing over the apple cart, and because that freaks people out. And again, I have experience working in different countries around the world on this stuff, and so I'm curious, though, back to your point, Sharon, about fear, because I think it's, for myself anyway, I can say it's super important that I understand people, because that will make us more effective in how we communicate our ideas.
Yeah, just, I don't know, when somebody pushes back against something and I get triggered by the pushback and I start feeling
Mm,
judgment,
mm,
it's really important. I tend to say, look, boom, there it is, but that's not the way to really get heard. If there's a hope of getting heard, it's much better to say, I really hear you. I hear your concern. I hear your fear. I may not share that feeling, that hesitation, or that distrust,
right,
but
right.
I know what that feels like.
Okay.
I hear it, and I'm just
Yeah,
honoring that you're feeling that way.
right.
I may not be able to do anything about it, really.
Yeah.
But just
Is
to let
there
people, I don't
Is
know.
there a way moving forward, maybe Wednesday or in some kind of written product? So I have two suggestions. One, Kevin, maybe, I don't know if we've got enough time, but line out this week or next week, or maybe both, line Olivia out to run the meeting. Take a back seat for a bit and make notes, and kind of potentially watch the group and see those dynamics and kind of frame yourself for, because I think some of what the conversation we're having here is time consuming, but the
Yeah.
whole group needs to participate on some level, I think, to move forward. Because unaddressed, those gaps, I think that the us and them, whatever it turns into, is potentially the division it could create. I think is potentially going to take away, or could take away from the mission at hand. So I don't know. I would consider maybe something like that. Okay, I don't want to stifle this conversation because it's a good one, but let's, if there's time, I'm just going to make a note to myself to wrap back to this if we push through.
I kind of would like to kind of maybe take this conversation into a more specific conversation about the work of this committee.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just because when we are looking to set boundaries and requirements for things that have not been done in the county mindfully, respecting, not only respecting, you know, people of color or people with disabilities or you know, the people that are at some disadvantage to many of us. Just there's a way of going about things where you're really imposing things on people, and that often causes pushback. You know, even from people who really believe what you believe and feel that these things should happen, you can actually get pushback because people start to feel threatened and start to feel blamed, like fingers are being wagged at them. So how can we approach this in a way that's strong and powerful, but actually is not, I don't know, not sounding like it's blaming people or shaming people. I've been involved in a couple situations in the last year around racial equity and 21-day training with a woman named Erin Jones. And she gave a wonderful racial sensitivity training. And she honored everybody. And she didn't say things like, you're centering yourself here. You know, she didn't say any, I didn't hear her say anything in the course that made anyone feel bad. It was all really respecting everybody and understanding that we're going through changes and that's going to trigger some people here and there. And the other thing was, you know, I was in another situation where I was on an endorsement committee and I was speaking against endorsing a very specific Black woman for a very specific position. And a couple of white women started yelling at me and calling me a racist. And I mean, I had a very good reason for why I didn't want to endorse this one specific person for this job. You know, I was endorsing everybody else, you know, which included people of color. It was so, you know, you see what I'm saying? There's a level of communication that people can take in. And there's a level of that is just completely unskilled and is not going to get you the result that you want. Does that make sense?
Are you seeing this dynamic so far, or you're just thoughtful that you want to avoid it?
Yeah, I'm just thoughtful that I'd like to avoid it, and I think Linnea is on, and I think she's a good person to speak to about it because, you know, she and Justice Loring have been doing a lot of work in this area.
Do you have a specific question for her? I'd love to. I don't know if Linnea is going to stay. I'd love to. I don't want to stifle the conversation. I actually want to push forward with it, but make it, you know, a specific question that she can answer, so we can.
Yeah.
So we can cover this and other things.
Yeah. What skills are required to make these changes and communicate these changes in ways that don't you know, stimulate a really, really severe pushback? I'm not saying that really well, but, you know, how do you create a balance between moving things forward and kind of helping people through it emotionally?
That's such a great question, Sharon. I have a follow-up question just so I understand. Are you thinking about how do we create that system and introducing those ideas to the general public or to our staff? That would help me answer that question a little bit better.
Both, but definitely to the staff. You know, if you come in and you say, okay, now things going to be this way, you're going to do this, you're going to do that.
Right. Yeah, well, you're naming it right there. So first of all, we would never take that kind of approach. And I'm not sure how Judge Loring has done it with her immediate staff, but with the juvenile court and juvenile services group, we've done it gradually over time. We've talked about research, we've cultivated and attracted candidates to come work for the department who uphold those values. We ask implicit bias questions at the interview process. We do role plays. We see how people would react or respond to people who are role playing a stressful situation that may lend itself to demonstrate certain kinds of bias. And then we do a lot of training, and then we do an annual retreat. And it's also, that's a core part of our cultural principles to the department, our department culture. It's foundational that people need to be welcome and be respected.
Sharon, can I ask this question? I wonder, I would love to have this conversation to help, thanks Linnea, help inform the process, but I wonder, would it be, would one approach or one angle be to essentially move forward and create our body of work and pick out the places where we do intend to impact the county or impact the charter or one via the other one, and then run it through a filter about sort of messaging and modeling?
Yeah.
I ask because, you know, right now it's really good, important stuff to keep in mind as we move forward, but I think we can talk about that at length and maybe never get to the actual product of the work.
Yeah. No, that's fine. I just felt like I wanted to be somewhere in our consciousness how we're going to achieve these things in a way that people can take it in, supportive of it, and feel good about it. And you know, that may never be 100%, but that we should do the best we can in that regard. And I'm complete with that.
Okay, thanks. We'll see. I think the audience for some of this oversight, to Kevin's point, are going to be people that are, well, it'll be interesting to see. There's a fairly small group of people over whom we initially want to have the impact and make the difference. Some of that is like, pass this educational message through your people, and some of it is very much, no, we don't support that, or we'd like this done in a different way. So, okay. So what I wanted to do, I'm going to share just this piece of, I mentioned, and the number 3 bullet is to share some conversation about our spreadsheet. And so if you recall, we did some moving around, or we made some references. I should have included the numbers of where things were going to live. If I got this wrong, please bring it up with me. But I think out of last week, I heard us say that we were going to focus on these 3 things, at least initially, moving forward. So the creation of an oversight committee, determining areas where the charter or our current government structure, at least in the county, can have better respect for equitable and equal rights, and then to weave in these very specific pieces of age, sex, gender, and so on. One of the pieces that was brought up from the public input was rights for children, or rights for other than adults, or recognition of the importance of keeping children in mind. We had a little bit of a conversation at the end of last week about that. The only place I put that in here so far was age, and I'm not sure that covers it. I want to come back to that and have a conversation about that. The other piece I took some liberty and combined 2 of my own. There was one about having Native sort of values in county structure, and there was another about trying to encourage or expand Native presence in the inner workings of the county, whether it's boards or commissions or actual county elected county positions or employment. That's really 2 in 1 in number 3, and I think the way we left that was basically to say we had spent our time focusing on 1 and 2 so far, and we would see how that moved forward with time. One of the other ones was sort of another collaboration about social services, and there was one, I think it was number 9, that was concern about mental health, social welfare, and housing. And one of mine from before was about trying to expand social services. And so Number 4, with the idea that we'll table this awaiting some focus time, is broaden access to social and behavioral health services and facilities, including housing, with centralized oversight. If you recall, one of them, number 5, support for kids in schools, having an educational office and specifically rights of children. Again, I want to talk today some about how rights of children does or does not fit into some of maybe into number 2, where we said we wanted to put it, but we agreed that some of this would be pushed out, maybe through local school boards or Department of Education, instead of being necessarily a charter concept. Some of this would go as a topic, basically onto another resting place. Number 6, proactively incentivize younger and multicultural populations into local government. That was one of mine, sort of tabled awaiting focus time. And I did hear some conversation about, and I forget which committee it was, and you can help me when we talk about this, somebody talking about more thought about board and commission membership and expanding the types of people, or the where we invite and how we reach out to citizens in the county for membership there. And then Kevin had added one along the way about community policing and seeing sheriff deputies on bikes and so forth. So that's captured and held on the table awaiting time. So I did that all at once because I wanted to see your faces. If you want it kept up, I'll reshare it. But I can also send it as an attachment to you guys if you want it in your inbox. Do we want to go through that? Is that a fair reflection of how we move the numbers around? Is there any conversation to be had on this? Kevin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This came up in our last conversation, and I brought it up at the full CRC presentation. And I've thought a lot more about it. And I want to throw out there an idea that I think encapsulates everything we've been talking about, or could. And I'm hoping it's not one of those situations where you ask for everything, you get nothing. I believe that instead of a law and justice oversight commission, we should think of what could be called, a working title would be the Equity and Justice Oversight Commission. They would have jurisdiction not just over law and justice, but over the county. And it would truly be an oversight commission. And then as we start to put together these different ideas that we've talked about, I think we get as prescriptive as we possibly can with the strengths, the authority, and the tasks, where appropriate, that this oversight commission would embark upon. I think that we would need to list who are the members, and I'm not talking individuals, but you would say you need to have a diversity of representation, including, and then you could see it would be, the phrase including but not limited to, and you would say 1 member of Coast Salish tribes. And you'd also clarify in that position, for instance, that they don't have to be a resident of Orcas Island. You'd say at least 50%, or at least, I would actually say at least 51% female membership. At least, and then, I don't know if you say a member of our Latinx population, or if you say members of our Latinx population. And then you say, and others to represent the diversity of the community, including gender identification, sexual orientation, and so on. The next thing you start going into is the tasks. And I think many of them we've listed here. But one of the other things that struck me at about 12:20 a.m. when my Pandora feed stopped working on the way up Mount Baker, on my last sojourn to the Powder, on what would have been early Friday or Saturday morning in a whiteout, this is what I'm thinking is, wow, if this commission were successful, what if it were in the charter that every single ordinance that was passed by the county commission, the county council, had to be reviewed for racial, or just not just racial, but for justice and equity by this commission. Right now, we have that situation with the planning commission. All land use ordinances go to the planning commission and are vetted by them first, including our full comprehensive plan. They hold hearings. That's the other thing. We would authorize this group to hold their own hearings, have their own public input, and so on. So it would be structured similar to the planning commission, but even stronger. And then we start going through all these other things and we get prescriptive. But I think that's a way to, we could talk about that. They would conduct an audit of all place and street names in San Juan County to identify any that are inappropriate or should be, or would be better represented by the original Coast Salish names. They would, we can think about whatever we want it to be. And again, we can't, as the Charter Review Commission, dictate what policies this commission would recommend or advance, but we can dictate the tasks that they will embark upon that will then influence those policies. And for me, I started thinking that everything we've been talking about for me could be covered by this, almost everything could be covered by this one oversight commission.
So would it be, sorry,
Please, go ahead, Jane, sorry.
Kevin, would it be staffed by sort of volunteer citizens? Is that what you're thinking?
The members would be volunteer citizens. I think that we would put in there that it would be staffed by, I don't know if it's staffed by, it's staffed by the county. They would need dedicated staff the same way the Planning Commission has staff. There's staff from the planning department who staff the commission.
Okay.
My hesitation there was whether or not it's if we just say county staff, or is it, a member of the prosecuting attorney's office or something? I'm not sure.
Okay.
But you're bringing this up now in kind of reference to our issues list and how to be more inclusive of those and gain some ground there.
I think we
Is
could.
that right?
Yes. I think this encapsulates, for me anyway, a majority of what we've been talking about, bundles it up into one package, and then gives us a task, which is, okay, let's start doing the findings on how strong we can make this.
So I have another question.
Please go ahead, Jane. I'm watching two screens.
So I think this really, this is a really interesting, very interesting notion, and I really do like the idea. I'm gonna put to us a question to play devil's advocate, and but also I want to raise this question because I think we need to be clear amongst ourselves as to what we're trying to accomplish here. But what I would ask is, why do we need such a commission in the county? Why do we, four white people, think that this commission is actually going to do something useful? So I'm being a bit facetious here, but I'm playing devil's advocate because, for people who can't even comprehend that there are issues of racial discrimination and sex discrimination that exist in this county, they're probably going to scratch their heads and go, well, what's wrong with the way things happen here, right? So what problem are we trying to address and resolve through the creation of such a commission? Because I can almost guarantee you naysayers on this are going to challenge us in that way.
Sure.
Well, I have to say that I think probably San Juan and again, I don't know this for sure, but my impression is that San Juan County overall is more progressive minded than a lot of other counties. I don't think we have the level of maybe discrimination or harassment that goes on in other parts of the state. But then again, there are lots of things I don't see. Like I hear that domestic violence is a big problem in the county. I don't see that.
Mhm.
I'm sure it's true, but I haven't witnessed it myself. You know, I'm aware that occasionally I will hear about something that happens, like a child getting teased in school or something like that. And then I go, okay, is this a problem that you want me to step up and do something at this point, you know? But we already know that the hiring practices of the sheriff are something that need to be updated. And maybe we need to identify other things, but maybe we can't identify. Maybe we just need to have something in place to say, you know, moving forward, we're really going to be considering this. We're really going to be making this part of what we consciously do, rather than just assuming that everything is being done equitably, which I don't think we can do.
Right. Yeah. Kevin, did you have thoughts on that?
I mean, I know you're being facetious when you ask that. I mean, the examples, our own CRC meeting last week, we had a member after our presentation say, wow, is this an issue? And they're a nice person and we're being honest. They were saying, you know, I haven't seen it. Then you look at, you know, for me, and I remember writing this about this time, well, a little later, about 9-10 months ago, at the height of the George Floyd protests after his murder, writing to somebody that, wow, we are the most progressive voting county in the country. The BLM protests raised for me the fact that even in liberal San Juan County, we have an underbelly
Mhm.
that is racist and sexist.
Mhm.
And we need to acknowledge that. And Sharon, to your point, it may not be as extreme as other communities, but it's there. And the other thing is, yeah, I mean, domestic violence in San Juan County is higher than most counties in the state.
Mhm.
And during COVID, we saw a spike. And so there's issues that need to be addressed. There's also just a subtle, I mean, we are a super white community. So how do we not only accept but celebrate diversity? And that's not just in race. It's in gender identification, sexual orientation, all of it, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
And so I would say to the naysayers who will start pushing back on us as soon as we put this out there, two things. One, it exists. Two, even if you don't believe it does, or even if you believe it's so minor that it wouldn't justify this, wouldn't it be great if San Juan County got out in front of this and took these steps to be more progressive and address these issues? And I keep coming back to the young woman who stood up at the BLM protest on Orcas Island at the very beginning, teenager, jumped up on a table and looking out at a sea of middle-aged white people and said, this conversation is meant to make you uncomfortable. If you're not uncomfortable, you're not listening.
Mhm.
So some people are going to be really uncomfortable.
Mhm. Mhm.
And I think then we're doing our job.
Mhm.
So the final thing I would say is that then there's some just basic stuff like the place names.
Mhm.
We have Squaw Bay on Shaw. We have a number of sites named after a gentleman who went on to become a Confederate leader and was a slaveholder and so on. And
Mhm.
so
I I have a question. I appreciate the Jane. Go ahead.
Oh, no, yeah, did you want to go, Kyle?
Well, I kind of want to steer things a little bit, so I'd love to hear your response, your question.
My thought on this, and thank you for, entertaining that sort of controversial, question, if you will, the antagonistic question. But for me, what needs to happen in this county over the course of the next 10 years is a cultural shift, a shift in the consciousness of this county government and of its people, whoever those people are, as you said, Kevin, the need to recognize that there is diversity in the population, even if it's, yes, predominantly white, but that those people deserve equal recognition in all ways, before the law, in the provision of services, in terms of their basic human rights. And so what this is all about, in my opinion, is a cultural shift for this county. And for God's sake, it's 2021. And if you can't have a clause in your local government's charter that says it's not acceptable to discriminate, Jesus, hello, like, welcome to the 21st century, guys. Like, so for me, I'm very passionate about this, and I have to be careful because I just, it's a no-brainer for me. But it is cultural shifts take time, and they take a heck of a lot of awareness creation, and they take a heck of a lot of listening. And as Sharon said, recognizing it'll make people uncomfortable. I ask myself, though, people on the commission who are in their 80s, whose future are they charting? Because they sure as shit aren't charting their own. Excuse my language. But, come on. I mean, there are generations following, and I can tell you right now, I met a woman on Lopez Island who could not live here because she was a lesbian woman, and not just a lesbian woman, a non-binary woman. Okay. And so she was non-binary, but lesbian in orientation, and was basically feeling rejected on Lopez Island by the population. She felt shunned, and she couldn't continue living here. And this is a young woman in her 20s. And working in an organization that you think is super progressive, so there, so the second point I wanted to make, to keep us on track here a bit, Kyle, is we cannot speak for Indigenous peoples. I cannot speak for gay or non-binary peoples, okay? I can't speak for colored peoples. The closest I can come is speaking my brother's experiences with racism growing up with him. I can't speak the voice of poor people who have no jobs or no homes, okay? I can't speak the voices of elderly. I can speak the voice of a woman who's experienced sexual harassment and discrimination, and I'll speak it passionately, but I want to hear from those people. And to me, we're not doing a service to them if we're not letting them talk to us. And I know we plan to, but I think that is of topmost priority.
Sharon, I have a closing thing. Go ahead, and then I have kind of a move on summary.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I just want to say that sometimes can be really challenging to get somebody to talk to us because they don't want to be singled out, or they don't want attention brought to themselves, or they really don't think that anything's going to change. I spoke to one of my friends here on Orcas, and she's like, if there's something with teeth, if there's something that's really going to be impactful, then I'm interested in working with you. Otherwise I'm not interested. So I totally understand that.
I've talked to some people who are very interested, and yeah, I mean, yeah, I hear you, Sharon, though.
I think all of this is toward trying to settle on core workable, whether it's creation and making things that we want to see happen, or creating space for people that aren't like us to have more opportunity or more of their own space. I think part of what I would like to see us do is just settle on the approaches up front, so that we can spend more of our time hearing from people. So far, what I've heard, I don't know if we need consensus necessarily, but is there is there an appreciation that changing from law and justice to more of equity and justice, a working group and a commission, a committee, but an oversight one, does that sufficiently incorporate some of these other items in the worksheet, so that we could just say, have that question, and also, do we feel like with the couple of things we've addressed so far, so this commission idea and maybe a statement to go at the front of the charter, generally about to kind of match what we've seen in Snohomish County, or at least have something up front in our county government that focuses on Jedi issues. Have we got enough to work on right now, or have we got it captured, what our work plan is? Kevin.
I think we have it captured, and what I mean by that is I think new ideas will come to us over the next weeks as we're working on findings. And for instance, one of them I just wrote in the chat, which you can look at later, but it's, maybe this would be some sort of appellate body for discrimination and so on. I don't know how that works with HR or with legal proceedings, whatever, I don't know. But I think it's an interesting idea. The other thing is I'd want to make sure that our original idea of law and justice oversight is also given to this commission, so that we don't dismiss that it's not one or the other, it's both.
Okay.
And so
Yeah.
I think I am feeling like now I wanted to raise this today and see how the conversation went. Based on this conversation for the last 20 minutes, I'd be prepared to put a motion on the table that says that we're going to move forward with a equity and inclusion commission or something.
Justice and Equity.
Justice and Equity Commission. So the San Juan County Justice and Equity Commission the Justice and Equity Oversight Commission. And that we will begin defining the duties and scope of that commission, and that we will make it as strong as possible. That's a motion. Yeah, Mr. Chair, you know what? I don't want to put that on the floor yet if you want more dialogue or something else.
It actually addresses commission. All right, so I'm just writing in the chat. Does that sound like what you said? San Juan County Equity and Justice Oversight Commission.
Yeah.
Okay. I would entertain that motion, and for a couple of reasons. Anyone second?
I second.
Okay. Any other conversation around this more concrete sort of anchoring concept and name?
Just to clarify, sorry, Mr. Chair.
Go ahead.
Just to clarify that based on the previous conversation, that this motion encapsulates the idea of oversight over the county and its actions, and that we will further develop and define those as we develop our findings over the next weeks. But it is this broader concept that we've been discussing, and that at the same time we'll still have direct oversight over the courts, the prosecuting attorney, and the sheriff's department, and oversight, not advising.
I'm just going to write some notes. Would you entertain a friendly amendment to, like we did with, I think it was climate? So since this may serve as an actual name moving forward, for now, is this what you want, or could it be a what was the term we used, an acting name or a
working title?
Working title.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other discussion? I would say one thing I would like to see happen, which I think I'm hearing from all of you as a goal, is a mechanism within this body or a similar body for education, much like what Superior Court is able to do, whether that's in partnership with HR or some kind of means for this to also create, to improve the Petri dish, not just be oversight and top down, but also create, have the potential. And maybe it's not this group, but that is a goal that I have. So I'll just say that.
Okay.
So all in favor of Kevin's motion then, with the amendment to make this a working title, the San Juan County Equity and Justice Oversight Commission. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay. All right, so the ayes have it unanimously. That helps. So that'll be, I will rework number 1 on our matrix to reflect that. And I would also ask the same, a similar question, and maybe not take time today, but would you be able, Jane, to take number 2, because it still says within the charter and current structure, can we refine that? Are we far enough along to maybe specifically express the, a proposition to have a clause, justice and equity type clause in the charter, for instance? Is there a way to make number 2 more specific?
Yeah.
Or do you want to? Is it
Well,
soon to do that?
what I want to just get clarification on before I answer that is what I understand number 2 now being representative of is essentially not in the words that are there, but the mandate of this commission. And so what I'm kind of understanding here, Kyle, is that what we want to do is flesh out sort of the remit of that commission in terms of its tasks. And so I see what is in number 2 as being very much part and parcel of that. But we need to drill down a little further and articulate that as it concerns things like how, the human resources management within the county government, the work of the Law and Justice Board and having some relationship to that, the issue of the Civil Service Board and how it operates. So we need to drill based on our really the beginnings of our learning about our the different branches of our government, the different tasks and responsibilities this commission might have.
Okay.
So that's kind of, I mean, if you want me to start working on this in some manner, I'm happy to do so. I just would need to know, what would you like me to do? Kevin's got to say.
To answer your question, I think when I read that, it says, is the charter in the current structure or are the charter in the current structure of local government going to be able to serve our county effectively in terms of having respect, et cetera? I think we've answered that. We've said, no, it does not in its current form. It needs
Correct.
modifications. And so number 2 is maybe what you said. Number 2 is in part a function of developing the tasks or the sphere of influence or the scope of the board's operation or the committee's operation. That's all I'm looking for.
Gotcha.
Since you're the author or the founder of that, I would leave that in your hands to work with.
Sure.
Kevin, please.
I think that just to move us forward, one way to do this would be for us to list out what are the actions that we want and then start thinking about the findings. And I think a lot of our actions we've already put in there. I think that Jane just listed a couple more, at least one more. And so I think that it might be helpful for us to start listing out kind of what are the functions we see for this commission. And then we go back and say, okay, which of those can we actually do? Where do we have the ability to actually—
You're jumping ahead in the agenda.
I don't know. Sorry.
I agree. I think that's what I'd like to start accomplishing today. And that is, number 4 was meant to be a findings master list and to talk about how to capture that. Before we move to that though, do we need to preserve separately then entries 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7?
Can you pull up the screen again? I don't have my—
sorry, sure. So sorry. Here we go.
No worries.
So there will be verbiage change in 1 and potentially in 2. I am, to go down, I don't know if we necessarily need an up or down, but 3 was written to expand, broaden incorporation of Indigenous people, values, perspectives, problem solving into county structures and positions. Do you want to hit these one at a time? Let's do that. So, I have some strong feeling on this, and partly to Jane's point, I don't speak for that group, and I think it would take a fair amount of input from willing people to come speak with us to have a better sense of whether that's a mechanism that's valued by other people, and then to determine what that would look like. That could be in an initial way, and once we've heard from some of these people, and I certainly intend on doing that, those could be elements of tasks that this oversight commission is focusing on at some point. So I'm okay with that, moving into number 3, essentially moving underneath 1.
Yep, me too.
Okay.
I see space for that.
Number 4 was to broaden access to social and behavioral health services and facilities, including housing with centralized oversight. I don't see that one necessarily fitting, not in the theme that I see. That's to expand things like senior services, and to expand either the contract services that the county pays for through a place like Compass Health, which is regional but has staff members who work in this county and do everything from crisis management to long-term. Go ahead, Kevin.
Some of that I'm not sure is within our scope as the charter.
Mm-hmm.
Agreed.
Mm-hmm.
Agreed.
I think we could broadly say the county shall provide appropriate, blah, 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 but I'm not sure the charter has the ability to get into the shall versus should on that scenario. Or if we can, I can't envision it in my head anyway of how to do it.
Yeah.
Well, I think the only way I see it is creation of yet another office, or expansion of an office, or direction, a prescriptive direction to expand what's already there, basically under the county health department, but a giant body of work, and make some assumptions about how that would be organized. So,
Kyle, something
Okay.
in relation to this, though, I look at, so I'm looking at 4, I'm looking at 6, and I'm looking at 7. And I think those 4, 6, and 7 can be rolled into and under sort of the overall remit mandate of the commission, at a higher level. So when I look at this county is responsible for service delivery in many forms. And what through the creation of this commission, what we want to ensure is that there is equitable, distribution and provision of services to all peoples in this county. And so that includes housing, and that includes services. So the point being that you inculcate a culture within the county government that does not discriminate, that ensures that all peoples are equitably served in accordance with their rights. So that's I agree with Kevin's point. I think though that, so I think that this issue would fall under that, that we're a county that doesn't discriminate, and more than that, it functions in service to everyone. That's kind of how I see that.
Okay. Sharon, any input?
Nope.
Okay, so I'm hearing then that 4 can be, if reworded or somehow included as a task or part of the scope of number 1, that it can go away as a separate line. Is that fair? Is that a summary of what we said?
I think so, yeah.
Okay. All right. And you said also 6 and 7.
Yes.
And then left out 5. Any discussion on that before I summarily include it that way? Any other thoughts? So number 6, incentivization of younger and multicultural populations into positions, basically, into functions.
Yeah, and that's part and parcel of what we've talked about before in terms of, for example, the Civil Service Board and the manner in which it can exercise, some some affirmative action, quite intentionally. Similarly, you know, with the management of the county government. So those are, you know, they can be deliberate about that. They can be intentional about that if it's expected of them. Currently, it's not. It's not there, and therefore it doesn't happen.
Okay, number 7, Kevin, this was something you had touched on a couple of times. Does that fit? So law enforcement more involved in community building. Is the shift from law and justice to justice and equity, and a modification or an expansion of the sort of the scope of this oversight committee? Does it cover that? Can a citizens board, a mixed citizens board, advise or direct the sheriff's office to police in a different way? Is it enough?
This is similar to the last one for me. So this is a big deal for me. Unfortunately, I don't know how much of it is within the scope of the charter versus the body that we're creating.
Okay.
I would like to see this commission after we appoint them. I would like to see them have the authority to mandate that the sheriff's department get more engaged in community aspects. And for me, a recommendation would be put cops on bikes, get them out of their cars, let them walk down the streets. In the 5 different communities where I lived where they did this, it made a fundamental difference. It was huge, because then they're just walking down the street. You talk to them, you're like, hey, how are you? Including in Portland, which is a very large city. It's a good move. That said, I believe that's out of scope for our commission. I think we can create this oversight commission who could make a recommendation or a mandate if we can strengthen their oversight enough to do something like that. But I don't know how, I shouldn't say it's not within our scope. I don't know how we put it within our scope for the commission at this point.
Okay.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, ma'am.
A thought on that. So Kevin, and thinking about what Kyle was just saying about, you know, if we can build somehow within this commission some mandate around awareness raising and education, some element of that. What I could almost imagine is you know, the commission helps to organize and facilitate community discussion with the sheriff and the sheriff's office about how to create a partnership around community building that includes law enforcement in a positive way. I don't know, I'm just talking off the top of my head here a bit, but I mean, this commission could be all kinds of creative things. And so you can imagine if there is some scope for this commission to do some education and awareness raising, supported perhaps by volunteers in the different communities of this county, you know, that they might decide to take this on, you know, and look at how a healthier relationship with law enforcement could be cultivated in the county.
Yeah, exactly. But there's a fine line we're walking between what our scope of work and what we're dreaming of.
Yeah, true. Yeah. Right.
Okay, for time, I appreciate this. I think this is actually, I know that maybe Jane would run this differently. I think this is helpful because I've been seeing these other items kind of ill addressed or insufficiently addressed, and this does help. And there's been some movement on your part, Kevin, to kind of broaden your thought on law and justice and expand to equity and be more of an umbrella. And I think that's helping, and I think it will actually serve us. Number 5 then has been, can this be standalone, kind of less addressed by us, except for the rights of children specifically, which I would see included under the scope of the oversight commission. and all other components of that that were raised in the town hall be sort of pushed on to someone in the school board or Department of Education or something like that. Is that fair? Does that address that? Okay. Any other comments on this matrix? Sharon?
What is that? I just want to clarify what that means. Number 7, consider within scope of position 1. What is position 1?
I meant it only as I could put it in, I guess, as the oversight. It was only like line 1 of the matrix, but the oversight.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, sorry. Okay, so that actually was, I think, the lion's share of what I wanted to try and accomplish here, because I think it's actually working on the document, but it's talking about all the focal pieces within. Number 4 that I had was then to, and this is less specific findings that we know so far, but I think every committee will benefit from some kind of methodology for capturing findings, whether it's the equivalent maybe in a face-to-face meeting would be some kind of parking lot. The reception of using Teams and a place there has been pretty tepid. I appreciate that, but some of what's been said already, and I think there's a degree of mining through our committee notes, meeting notes to find these, but I think offline, we can do a lot of this findings work, putting down what we think it is that has made it, that has gotten us to these reactive places, or these or the impressions that we have. But I wanted to get an idea from you guys, how do we do that? Where do the findings go in the meantime? Whose job is it to collect those, and what next? So I encourage your thoughts, and this is really the mechanics of it. Again, all I was looking for is the mechanics of how to accomplish that. Sharon.
Yeah, I don't really have an answer to that. I do know that I would like to be given a specific task or tasks to take care of by the next meeting, if that's a sound way to go about it.
So I've heard this put a couple of ways. So findings, in fact, I could use, and maybe there are people here who could help me on this. What is it? A finding of fact is different than a finding, and an emotional experience of a school child who's bullied is maybe one of 2 things. It's an emotional experience that if it doesn't get reported, or I'm not suggesting it didn't happen if it isn't written down, but what are findings for the purpose of our work versus impressions that we have, or our impressions at some point sufficiently, counted, should they be counted as findings? So, and again, I think every committee, all the working committees now need to have a definition and a parking lot kind of idea, because I appreciate how important these are. So, any other input? Jane, if you weren't blinking, you look frozen. Okay.
Yeah. I'm thinking. Well, obviously, from my perspective, we haven't come up with all our findings yet. There's more discussions we need to have.
Sure.
And so I feel like what we can do is come up with a narrative that will sort of speak to how we've arrived at this place. And I think we can write some narrative around that, but I think there's more we need to learn, and I think we need to hear from a few folks, and to further inform our understandings of the necessity for this kind of commission. I think we can reflect on for me, it's a finding. There were many findings that came out of the sheriff's presentation. Okay. For me, some of the findings I've come across that are relevant to the work of this group are conversations I've had with people who live here, and have experienced things not so pleasant, right? And Sharon's had some of that. We've all had those with people we know who lived here rather. And so, yeah, I think I think it's important that we capture, the findings in the form of some kind of narrative that reflects what we've been deliberating over, that's brought us to this place. That's one task that I think we need to begin working a bit on. The same time, I think doing what Kevin was talking about in terms of fleshing out, the scope and remit of this commission is pretty important, and coming up with some questions that we need answers to, not the least of which is, how can this body have some kind of teeth that other commissions and councils and boards of this county do not? And so we're going to need to get some information about that. So in other words, we need to begin to flesh out this entity that we're talking about establishing. The other thing that we need to figure out is, how would this be written into the charter in a directive way? And yeah, so.
Sure.
And how much are we going to use something like the King County Charter as a bouncing off place?
All good questions. For right now, I feel like maybe I didn't get my point across. I just want to be able to go back and say the direction we took is because of this. There were certainly ideas up front that informed a matrix that we built, but from there we heard from people, and we will continue. All of what they put in our findings, I just want to capture those so that, one, for the public record, but probably more importantly, as the kind of the roots of the product that we're building. And I think that's, at least I thought I heard from Kevin and from others, is that, the findings in fact are really what justify us moving forward with our work product. So I'm not sure. I'd be happy to start a Microsoft Word document or some other matrix where we capture those. But I feel like a bulleted list would help us. And I was just looking for conversation there. Okay, we got about 4 minutes till Linnea and or anyone else who joins us have time to talk.
And Mr. Sheriff,
Yeah, please.
I have to run away now.
Okay.
I'm being told it's time to get to the kitchen.
You have anything, anybody, can we talk about guest list for a second then with you? Is Berto joining us realistic, or is that unlikely?
I just haven't heard. He had a lot going on, and so I didn't want to bother him, and so I texted him, a week or so ago, and I didn't want to go back to him again.
Okay.
But I will do so, or you can do so. I was thinking late this week for next week.
Okay, I would still like to hear from him. I just want to solidify.
I think it'd be great to hear from him. Why don't you reach out?
Okay.
Because we've had an inability of him to attend the last number of weeks, I'd like to have a second option, and for someone to speak to us. And I'm wondering if your Hispanic community leaders, Kyle on San Juan Island, who you're familiar with, could they speak with us?
I don't see why not. I don't know that there'll be the, thanks, Kevin.
Thank you, Kevin. Are they going to be comfortable talking to us or not?
I think so. Yeah, I will certainly assure that. I was going to say, I don't know that they're going to offer anything like, I don't know Berto at all. So I'm not sure that they will, I feel like giving them some direction, not to steer them, but to kind of ask on what level to talk about. I think I have enough information. Sharon, go ahead.
Yeah, well, I know Berto.
Okay.
And I would be happy to follow up with him. I do know stuff he's been going through in his, with his family.
Okay.
So, but I will get in touch with him right away, because I really, he is really a strong link between us and the Latino community, and I'd really like to hear from him. And he's very much through a social justice lens.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I don't say this what I'm gonna say, I don't say it because I want to push him out. I just want to be able to not be Sunday last minute in
Yeah.
future weeks, because
We want to speak on, we'd like to speak to us this coming next Monday.
yeah, and I'd love an answer by the CRC of Wednesday, if you can get a hold of him, and let me know, I guess, to help Jane prepare for, we don't even know who's going to lead
Yeah.
next
And we
week.
still,
Yeah.
and are we still trying to get Barbara LaBrache to come and speak with us?
Well, we haven't dealt with, this is the first time, and I guess we're transitioning. Let me just say, I would love some ideas about the findings, kind of how to put findings in a warehouse, how we want to do that. Let's have some ideas for next week.
Mhm.
And in the meantime, put them somewhere or somehow. Jane, you had a reaction there.
Yeah, I don't mind. Look, I will, if you want me to come up with a findings narrative that sort of distills what we've deliberated and how we've gotten to this, what I can write are, I write documents, so I can do that. And what in a way, what I would do is take this think piece thing that I gave you guys last week, and I would just write it a bit differently and write it as a synopsis of findings up to this point. So that wouldn't take me a lot of time to do.
Okay, I guess I don't have any hesitation. My only question is that the format that makes the most sense? I mean, it tells a great story. That's different than a bulleted list? I haven't never done this before. I don't really know.
Well, I don't know what's required. I guess that's part of my confusion too. I had a similar conversation about this with Dave Anderson earlier today. I think we need clarification on that, frankly.
Well, I will speak to the extent that we need to, maybe under new business on Wednesday in front of the full CRC, and get an impassioned plea to get direction on what the
Yeah.
findings should look like, because it's time to know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to wrap the findings discussion up. Number 5 on the agenda was to conditionally name and discuss span of influence and vision of the Justice Oversight Committee. We've done that. We did
Yeah.
both of those things.
Yeah.
The number 6 piece, and I'm going to come back to this because we're right at an opportunity for Linnea. I'm trying to find, actually, if you can find it quicker, Jane, the proposed guest list, just to go through and talk about dates when we reconvene here in a minute, and have that be kind of our last thing. So.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, Linnea, you're the sole attendee, it appears. I didn't see anyone else try and get in. If you have anything to add from earlier or wanted to mention in front of the group, the floor is yours.
Oh, thank you so much. I am home at spring break, so I'm parenting this week. So thank you for letting me join. I'm so grateful for the work that you're doing and the very difficult discussions you all are engaged in. It is incredibly inspiring, and I just really enjoy being a fly on the wall.
Okay. Come
Linnea?
back anytime.
Linnea, I just wanted to say one thing before you go.
Sure.
Yeah, and that is that it keeps ringing in my mind the importance of ensuring that whatever this oversight body does, it recognizes the limitations of its mandate, given the roles and responsibilities in legal terms of justices and the PA, for example. So because Justice Loring, she did make that comment, that such a body can't be interfering in the business of the court conducting its business. And I'm sure the PA would feel the same way. So we need to understand more about that. And so we've got to figure out, how do we get clarity on, the limitations of such a commission in that regard, given that there are certain elected offices that have legally mandated responsibilities.
Sure, thank you. I think it's really important, and I don't know that it will be an easy answer. I just encourage those to think about things that can be tracked and replicated. So data and statistics, if there's specific outcomes that you all as a body think are really important, or that you think this commission should be directed to be thinking about, then I think your leaders who are serving the public should be able to answer
Mhm.
how those statistical decisions and outcomes and, if you want to see detention alternatives, what is our percentage of detention alternatives? Just
Mhm.
those are some of the things I'm thinking about, or alternate
Mhm.
sentencing, or just maybe not how did you arrive at that decision, but perhaps how many, and are you improving from one year to the next?
Gotcha. Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, I see what you're talking about. Okay. So it's really more a tracking function in a way, right? That informs the commission so that it can have dialogue, right, with the directions of a given office.
I think so. And I think if we're not thinking about outcomes, then we're missing a critical opportunity to improve our practices and look at our policies,
Yeah.
improve our training. And
Right.
so if we're answering to a commission um, on our outcomes, I think it lends itself to thinking about it through the rest of the year.
Excellent. Okay. No, that's very good. That's very good suggestion. Okay. Thank you for that.
I have one other thing before you sign off completely.
Oops.
How dare you stand outside during this meeting? That's all I want.
Do you not want to see my house right now? I've got a 2-year-old. Just believe it's like
I
that.
just meant blue sky, green trees. That's all I meant. Okay, thank you.
Thanks,
We're
Linnea.
we're gonna go back and deliberate for a half second here. So thank you. I'm gonna share screen again. If you went and did it, I'm sorry you spent the time because I did find I was in the wrong folder. So this is what I have, and this was
Yep.
the kind work of Jane to put together some weeks ago, and we have not gotten here much. I don't necessarily mean to add to it today, although we certainly could. Some of these folks we have heard from, and then we have kind of a proposed list, and to some extent we've had a little more conversation. Do we want to hear from Mr. Wolf also as the HR director? Did our conversation with Cindy, Council Member Wolf, I'm sorry, was that sufficient? Or do we have more sort of specific for the scope of this committee? So, do we want to move people around? I think I got the feeling that specifically if they're county staff, Catherine wants to be in the know and be able to kind of mix and match the invites. And I thought that I heard that 2 weeks was kind of the perspective there. I would like to hear from Mr. Wolf personally. And I would recommend that he come back to us on I think I have my calendar out. 2 weeks from today would be, we save a spot for Roberto next week or next time, which is going to be the 19th. Yes, the 19th. And then for the 26th, I would recommend, or I would petition for Mr. Wolf, only because my thinking there is that I see some, especially after today's conversation, I see some cross coverage between a commission like this, especially from the educational part. If it was an asset in his mind, or a really great dovetail, that would be one thing. If he felt strongly up front or this early in the process, like that was, I don't know, somehow competitive or somehow at cross purposes, I would definitely want to hear that and acknowledge that to the group. So I want to hear from you guys, though. You two. Do you want me to keep this up here?
We
for the
can.
conversation?
Sure. Sure. I had a couple thoughts, but Sharon, do you want to go first, or?
No, you go ahead.
Okay, thanks. In terms of Cindy Wolf, I don't know that we need to hear from her again at this point. That's my take. I'm conscious of the amount of time we have, and I just don't feel, I feel we got some response from her on what we were looking for regarding the resolution, how they're trying to chart forward. It complemented in a way what Mike Thomas had to say to me about that in terms of how that resolution might be getting some traction in the county government in the future. So for my money, I don't feel Cindy's a priority. That's just my opinion. I think if your contacts in the Hispanic community in San Juan Island aren't going to have a lot more to offer than Berto, I would say Berto over them. But that's just a suggestion. I don't know them. I don't know either of them. But I just don't know that we necessarily need to dip into that community 2 times.
I would agree. Not knowing
Yeah.
what Berto's going to cover or whether he can make it, that's the challenge.
So let's play that by ear, because I wouldn't take them off, because it sounds like they're involved in the community in a number of different ways. A slightly separate point, we keep talking about King County, and I'm wondering if for King County, we can't do that offline. In other words, one of us interviews an appropriate representative from the King County government to talk to them about their oversight and law and oversight, or whatever it's called, Law and Justice Oversight Commission. I don't know that we need, I'm thinking we may be able to shortcut a few things by having some one-on-ones. And so I think that would be the way to go with the King County constituency, if you will. And I understood David Summers was going to be presenting to the full commission from what Kevin told us.
Is that tomorrow? Is that Wednesday? Or is that 2 weeks out?
I didn't look at the email from Catherine.
Okay, that's okay. We don't need to take time.
No,
I would ask that the 4 of us form some questions, maybe. I would agree. I don't know if we need to hear from him separately, but I certainly have some Jedi related things to questions to ask of him. I didn't appreciate that he was the executive until Kevin mentioned that last time. I thought he was actually more of an HR person, so.
Right. So
Okay.
for my money, he's critical. And so too is speaking with someone from King County, which I think Sharon mentioned before. I think speaking with Kathy Obenhaus is going to be important regarding the Civil Service Board. And it's probably important that we all hear from her, unless you feel one of us should talk to her, interview her.
When you say all, you mean this full committee, not the.
Yes. Yes. If you're all interested, otherwise we go interview style, and one of us, we put together questions, send them around for any additional inputs from other committee members, and then you go for an interview in the interest of time.
Yeah.
Has anybody reached out to her?
Not yet, no.
So I can go ahead and do that. I feel like, I don't know if people have really been reached out to or not. And I feel like we need to hear from them like in the next couple of weeks. So
Yeah.
I can reach out. I can reach out to any number of these folks. There's not too many people. There's like, what, half a dozen people or whatever.
Yeah.
Where in this duo here, so far at least, based on what you know, I appreciate that his presentation has to which committee through Maureen?
Operations.
So that came through already. I have not, did anyone else look at that yet?
I didn't have a chance. I think we should have a look at it though before we have him speak to us, because we'd want to get very specific about what we want him to talk about, so he doesn't waste his time.
Is this order then reflective of the group's impression so far, Berto, then Kathy, if time allows, or if there's enough heads up time, and then maybe Mr. Wolf?
I would say James before Kathy. That would be my suggestion. Sharon, do you have an opinion on that one?
Well, I guess I'd like to find out their availability first, and I'd like to speak with someone from the Lummi Nation real soon too.
Absolutely, and so
that is a good. I'm sorry. Just one more point is that if we do have a list of like just a few questions that we can just ask one-on-one, that would also be good.
Speeding it up, you mean, eh?
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. So So you can get in touch, Sharon, with James to find out if he's available on the 26th of April?
Yeah.
Okay. And let him know that we don't want to have him repeat everything he told the ops committee. There may be some overlap, but we want to talk to him quite specifically about our thinking around just there being some oversight commission on justice and equity.
Uh-huh, yeah.
Another thought I have that I wanted to run past you guys, although, yeah, we're still kind of working down this list. The Lummi Nation, as you just mentioned, Sharon, I mean, those seem to be Kevin's contacts, eh?
Yes, I think that's right.
Yeah, but I don't know if he's had the time to follow up with them. I do know Jay's Julius. I
Oh,
don't
yeah,
know Sharon Kinley, but I do know Jay.
okay.
And I wouldn't hesitate to reach out to him.
Well, then why don't you do that, Sharon?
Okay.
I'm interested in a male and female perspective, which I think is why we had two of them. Are they close? Are they friendly? You know?
I don't know.
Yeah. Okay. Hey, Sharon, here's a suggestion. Do you mind just touching base with Kevin and finding out, how to reach out to them and whether they could talk, both of them at
Okay.
one meeting? And
Sure.
just push Kevin on that and then tell him, hey, look, I'm going to reach out, but could they speak with us together? Do they know each other? Is that not appropriate?
Okay.
That would be great.
How did your keyboard get so loud? I never hear you typing.
Because I'm unmuted. Sorry.
That would be great. Barbara LaBrash, Sharon, can you speak to the importance of that from your perspective? I don't have a clue. It strikes me as being important, but
She was mine, I think,
Okay.
or I would concur. So she is the director of senior and social services for the county.
okay.
And she may be for time now that we're this far along, and she may be an either or with Mr. Wolf. They certainly don't speak for each other.
Mhm.
But on the topic of sort of equal access to services, specifically behavioral health, which is mostly her background,
Okay.
and social service, in terms of priority, I'd like to hear from her at some point. But I think I would like to sort of broaden, as we've
Okay.
discussed already, sort of broaden this conversation first, and if time allows, to hear her on the topic
Okay.
of sort of behavioral and social services, and what's available, what's here in the county now, and how that could be augmented in her mind.
Okay. So I have a suggestion, Kyle.
Sure.
Why don't you do an interview with her once we're a little further along in our thinking, and we could just come up with a set of questions that that you could interview her with, if you will, to give you some structure for your discussion. That would be my suggestion, but again, once we're a little further along. Sharon, what do you think?
That sounds fine. I know Barbara too, so if you want me to do anything like that, I can do that as well.
Okay, excellent. Well, let's handle it that way. And then between myself and Kevin, but probably myself, I could interview the King County government rep, if you guys were okay with that. And again, I would need to do some homework first. I'd have to refresh my memory of what they established in their charter, et cetera. And then I could get some suggestions from you guys as questions.
Okay.
Okay, so a question for you guys, and I think it's important we hear from Kevin on this, is the importance of maybe interviewing Randy Gaylord, or what we do with Randy. I don't know, but we definitely have to talk to him. We're not asking him for an opinion, but we definitely, I think, need to interview him or hear from him as a committee.
I think I'm going to ask you to hold that thought, Jane, because out of our conversation about nature yesterday, there's some pretty strong feeling about him having been missing. Not that having us not include him in the right ways. so far. So that's going to come up, I know, on Wednesday in front of the whole group. And so I think your question or your point might be addressed then.
Uh-huh, okay,
So I happen to
Okay.
agree, because in the end, the stuff is going to have to pass muster with him anyway, to some extent. I think there needs to be some earlier inclusion of his perspective is how I would.
You're
put
saying
it.
that came up in the process committee?
That came up in so process committee, if you remember that Bill and Liz and I were all meeting on the definition of nature Sunday or over the weekend.
Oh, uh-huh.
And it came up fairly strongly for the members of that group then. So yeah.
what do you mean that he,
Well, that when we're talking about creating new positions and giving potential legislative carve outs and things like that, and having members of the commission talk to other lawyers for advice or at least positions, we haven't spoken with Randy as a group or heard from Randy as a group overall on topics like that, and that's an oversight, and that should be. There's some pretty strong feeling that we should be working with Randy exclusively. I don't know how I feel about that, or I do know how I feel about that, and I don't share this person's angst about it, I'll say. But I think that I'm not saying that I want, especially on the question of oversight, I think that we get to deliberate and come up with a means for that group to oversee, to the extent legally possible or appropriate, to oversee some of the activities of the prosecuting attorney's office and the courts and the sheriff's office, certainly. And I don't mean to suggest that we get Randy's permission to do that, but that we do hear from him in terms of position.
yeah, I mean, just on that, I mean, I'll be interested to hear how this discussion goes on Wednesday, and I think I know who you're talking about. But as far as I'm concerned, to some extent, his advice is a bit of conflict of interest, frankly, on some level, in the sense that he's got stakes in this, right, big time, right? And I think that our committee and our commission needs to do due diligence and get alternative perspectives on some of this. And I that's a bit of sour grapes as far as I'm concerned. And
I hear that.
I'm
Yeah.
sorry. I'm sorry. I'm being public in this comment. I realize that, but I mean, we have a responsibility to gather various perspectives, in my opinion, and he's not, it's not his way or the highway. And I understood, frankly, that our committees were meant to be doing some of their work prior to going to him for an opinion. And so we're in the course of doing our work. And I mean, to what extent do we want someone who has as much skin in the game as he does involved in our work? I don't know. I'm just sorry. Sharon, your thoughts?
I believe I heard he's going to be retiring soon too. So, this is going to go beyond people currently working in the county.
I will say, not to have the last word, but I will say, I think that like anyone else, I would expect that position to make a distinction. And this needs to come from our chair in some way. And it'll be clear to the rest of us if he can't make this, but a distinction between his personal opinion or his personal way of carrying the job and the position of prosecuting attorney, and the law as it states you have bandwidth here to be able to make changes, or within the Washington Constitution, don't move forward because you're wasting your time, because there's no role or there's no avenue by which you can take this action. Those are separate. And anyone doing that job has to be capable of, and that's the place where I think that the distinction is, one or the other piece shouldn't disqualify him from being able to weigh in.
Right.
But I think it has to pass the sniff test, and where it doesn't, this group needs to have the wherewithal to move in spite of that, I would say. So I'd love to hear what he thought about that comment. But okay, we're over time. For the sake of the speakers list, we're gonna. I think I heard clearly, Sharon, you're gonna reach out to Berto for next week. And that'll be, Jane, are you still busy a week from now? Do you want to have another week's reprieve?
No, I'm good. I'm good for next week.
Okay,
And on the findings thing, should we just hit hold on that till Wednesday? On pulling together some findings, or?
I think any one of us can start a list, whether it's bulleted or told story
Okay.
form. I
Okay.
feel obliged to do that, and we're doing that for climate.
Okay,
Or
what,
I'm doing that for climate, but I think
Can
it's.
you-
oh, go ahead.
okay. Are you prepared to give it a kick at the can then, or do you want me to go for it? Or should,
I think at this point, we've each brought some kind of findings from just by talking to different community members. And I don't mind doing the work. It's not the work is too much. It's that I don't want to speak for other people
gotcha.
on their journey so far. So that's why I think a dumping place or
Okay.
what would be a better term? A collection point for
A
all
Google
of that.
Doc, a Google Doc, right?
Potentially, yeah.
Yeah.
A living document, and maybe that's the way. But to your point about how, I'd like to hear from the Wednesday,
Yeah.
either the body at large or,
Okay.
anyway. I frankly, I would like Catherine to host it just so it's more centralized, but
Yeah. Oh, okay. Okay. Maybe we just start doing our own little brain dump of things we've learned so far that related to our group's work. Does that make sense for now?
it does to me.
Sharon, do you think?
Sharon, can you brain dump?
Give me that question one more time.
I said, can you brain dump?
Can I brain dump
So,
right now?
Have you done anything but brain?
just if we came up with some of the bulleted
I was
points
doing
that are
taxes
quite,
most of the day, so I'm like,
if we came up, with our own list of bullet points on sort of things we've been learning along the way and finding along the way, and just capturing those things that we've been finding through this work, and then we could roll it into something once we know what that structure is supposed to be. Does that make sense? Okay. Excellent.
Are we fried?
I'm fried. I need
Okay.
to go. I have to go to the bathroom.
I was fried before we started, but that's okay.
Thank you, ladies. Okay, last touch then on, we'll make this invite list or the presenter list a living document also. And I like the rearranging and the, going through. So some of us have independent interviews at some point. Was I right then? Ms. Kinley and J. Julius, that's going to be one or the other of you, Sharon, you or Kevin?
Well, I'll check in with Kevin about it.
Okay. All right. Okay. Only other piece on here was new business. I have none. Is there anything else anyone wanted to? I was going to take this time and wrap around if there was extra to our initial conversation about kind of our impression of the reception of this committee's work in front of the whole CRC. I'm not sure we were done with that conversation, but we can leave that alive through the future weeks. Any other last points on that?
Not really. I have to do a sound check at 6, so I probably should get ready to do that.
Yeah.
We're
sounds
doing
good.
an online concert on Saturday.
Cool.
Yeah, it'll be fun.
Excellent.
You're prepping for Saturday on Monday?
Well, I'm going by somebody else's schedule.
Okay.
That's what
well, that's where it
musicians
fits.
When they want to do it, so that's when we're doing it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But hey, it's not bad. It's not bad actually. It's pretty good.
Yeah. Well, that was a great meeting, Mr. Chair. Do you want to?
Can I hear a motion? Yes, please.
Yeah, motion to adjourn, sir.
Second.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Hi.
I'm going to stop the recording now. And
Okay.
actually, am I still sharing? I'm just going to bear with me for 2 more seconds. Okay.
Excellent.
Stop the recording and save it to the web.
Thank you,
Thanks for
Lene.
joining.